Hey everybody, welcome back to Tech Recess. It's episode 7 with Ben and Mike. That's Ben over there. I'm Mike. How you doing, buddy?
Man, I'm doing great. It's a Thursday. I almost said Wednesday. I'm starting to forget. I'm doing fantastic. How about yourself?
Dude, I'm doing good, but I've already forgotten what day it is. I think that happened to me like a week and a half ago. It's all blurred together. It's so difficult for me to keep track. It's amazing how much of my weekly cadence comes and goes with the kids going to school. Like everything for me revolves around, my job when I'm leaving to go on a project or an engagement and when my kids are going to and from school. And when that stuff's not happening, my whole world apparently just falls apart.
Oh yeah, and mine is based on travel. Mondays and Fridays are office days. Tuesday mornings and Thursday nights are travel, and I haven't done any of that since early March. So it's interesting. I think I'm week 7 of quarantine.
Yeah, I don't know when the last one was, the last trip for me, but I've still got my suitcase in the floor of my bathroom with my clothes still in it. Like it's ready to go. All I got to do is zip it up, throw my toiletries in it, my razor and deodorant and toothbrush, and then head out. And that thing's been sitting there like staring at me every single day. It just feels so weird. I almost
Like a
don't.
puppy, please take me out.
I almost don't want to put it away because that almost feels like a sense of finality, so to speak. Like I'm just throwing in the towel. Like, damn it, this thing really is. It was a good run, baby, but we're done. It almost feels like I'd be giving in. Yeah, this has been an interesting year. Everybody's talking about it. When I think about what's going on in the news today, if it's not COVID-19 related, it's not making a headline. It seems it's wild.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
It,
I talked to somebody yesterday. They said they just want to go back to New Year's of 2019 and redo. Can we hit the reset button, please?
I would love to roll that back like a juniper and hit reset and try again. I would definitely love to.
Yep. Roll back all those commits. I like it.
Man, I'm excited about today's episode. I don't want to talk too much about it, but since we did kind of touch on COVID-19, man, our guest today is actually in one of the hotbeds in the United States. So I'm interested to talking to them and seeing how they're coping with things and how they're dealing with things because we haven't really touched base too much. I think I'm kind of practicing quarantine across the phone too and not even reaching out to people. I don't know what's going on, but I'm anxious to talk to this person. So let's go ahead and get the episode started. This is episode 7, and you are going into timeout, sir.
Oh, I'm in timeout. I'm always in timeout. I'm always saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing. What? So I'm actually going to be a little more self-inflicting of my wounds today. I fell for a hoax today as a cybersecurity professional who is all about telling people not to trust anything that you read on the internet, even if Abraham Lincoln said it. I fell for a hoax. I on LinkedIn, I was just perusing LinkedIn and saw that DEF CON was canceled. And I should have known that this is an ongoing theme throughout the years. But it completely threw me for a loop, with the COVID-19 stuff. I thought, well, maybe this is just, for this year. So I clicked on the link. Yes, I clicked on a link that I didn't really know where it was going. It had a weird domain, and I just got a text saying that we're not live. Interesting. Huh, I thought we were. Yeah, anyway, I'm going to say that okay. Okay, well, all right. Okay, Carla says you are. I lied. Okay, awesome. Now she got me for a second hoax. I've fallen for 2 hoaxes. I'm just out of it today. Anyway, DEF CON is not canceled. It's not even canceled. They haven't made a decision yet for 2020. I looked at the source code of the page that I fell for, and it said, "We got you," and "Congrats, you're so smart that you can see the source code of a page." So this is all to say, everybody, be careful what you click on. And even if you think that you are an amazing cybersecurity professional and you have all the confidence in the world that I have, you can still fall for links that go nowhere or provide false information. So be careful out there. Make sure you know what you're talking about. And especially before you go share it with your cybersecurity colleagues about, oh my gosh, DEF CON is canceled, you should probably do some research before that.
That's so awesome. I'm so glad that you clicked a link so that I could use that to heckle you at random times going forward.
Yes. Yep.
I don't think that people could hear me during that last segment, thankfully. But I did confirm that we are live. We've got people confirming in chat that we are live. And Bob,
Yep.
it's good to know that I'm not the only one with a random suitcase sitting out in my bathroom. I'm glad to know I'm not alone in this weirdness that we have going on with just 2020. So next up, we have a recurring segment called Show and Tell, which gives somebody an opportunity to be a sponsor of our show. And there's many different ways that somebody can sponsor Tech Recess. And this just gives them a platform to come forward and talk about either their company or one of their technical solutions and just kind of introduce themselves to the masses. We don't have anybody today, so if you're interested in becoming a sponsor, reach out to Ben or myself at technologyrecess@gmail.com. Ben, anything else you want to say about that before we start jumping into today's topic?
You don't have to be a tech company. If you sell chickens or what have you, we are open to letting you sponsor and give away free T-shirts, free notebooks, what have you, for our viewers. So anything that you want to promote, we aren't particular.
Yeah, and I'd almost be more interested in having a non-tech company be a sponsor, just because I'd love to start the dialogue of how technology is part of your operations as a non-tech based business. All right, let's go ahead and jump down into the classroom, where thankfully your flicker of that shadow behind your backdrop is far less noticeable because there is black in the background behind you. That was giving me a near seizure there for a moment.
I am doing everything that I can to not be translucent during these things. I've noticed that I have no skin complexion. It's not there.
You did one of those like 23andMe's. You did a genetic analysis, didn't you?
I am human, yes.
You are. I didn't know if you had some weird pigment disease that runs in your family, like lack of pigment, because you got Casperitis, man. You are definitely one of those pale individuals I've ever seen on camera.
I think our next episode we're gonna have to bring my son on. You can see veins through his body.
He has a future as an anatomically correct doll for like different college courses and stuff, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe anatomically correct wasn't the best phrase, just like correct as far as his anatomy you could see through. Anyway, we're moving on before this gets too far down into the gutter. So today's topic, man, I'm really interested in, just because I'm a nerd and I love all things data. And I've said it many times, we have transitioned pretty much from an analog species to a digital one. Everything that we do generates data. Data has become a commodity that's worth trillions of dollars today. It was something that we never even saw coming. In just a short amount of time, this has happened in a matter of decades, in a matter of a singular lifetime. We've seen our entire species move into this data-driven structure. Everything that we do relies upon energy and generates data. And so it's interesting to me to wade through all of this data and determine, how can we actually implement stuff based around this? How can we use this information to make us better? And so that's kind of the theme today when it comes to our businesses. So today we've got somebody who's based out of the Northeast Territories. He considers himself a craftsman of artisanal spreadsheets. He is heavily entrenched in the sales cycle, and so please welcome Chris Donlin. Chris, thank you so much for joining Ben and I, man. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk tech with us.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
Thanks. Good to be here. Very flat already. Such a lively guest. I'm so excited. Way to get him fired up, Chris. Way to get him fired up.
Oh, we're going to get into some awesome data, and everyone's going to get super excited in a little bit.
That's one thing I've never heard people really get jacked about. We're going to get into some awesome data, and people are going to get super excited. If you're speaking the truth, I can't wait to see it.
I think I got to send you some of my spreadsheets. You'd get really excited.
I've seen a few, man. I've seen a few. You do some special stuff. One thing I wanted to ask you, man, just jumping into this, is how did you get into this field? Like, there's so many things for me that interested me as a child, and I can see how those things have affected my path as I've gone through and kind of chosen my career and the things that I do today. How does someone get involved in business intelligence and data analytics?
Well, it actually goes back quite a ways. Back when I was in college, so unfortunately it's 2 decades ago now. But I was actually the teacher assistant for the history rock and roll class at University of Minnesota up in St. Cloud. And that was our biggest class on campus. It was a 650 student auditorium class. And so it was just one person, me, grading all the tests. We were using Scantron. I don't know if they still use those or not. Actually, I think everything's online now. But I had to keep office hours. And so I was stuck with all this data, and I had access to people's attendance, their scores and everything. And no one would ever come to office hours. So I would sit there with a Mac, and I kept everything in a spreadsheet. And I started just tinkering with the data and seeing what, for every student, because I didn't know any of these people, so it's basically blind data, like what attendance would mean towards grades and things like that. And it was very, very easily seen that after 1 or 2 semesters with the data, we could tell. We could put up a slide on the first day and say, if you don't attend class, here's what your grades will look like. And so just finding actionable data in a mess of just random data would seem like just people's grades. It's hard to tell one student from another from that perspective. We were able to affect some change. I mean, that drove attendance the next semester up, and our students had better grades because of that. And so seeing that you could affect change just by looking at what you have, what you gather normally, that was kind of powerful. Later on, I got into the tech industry because I actually graduated from that with a music degree, but came back to the tech industry, and I was reached out to, I was actually in Europe. A friend of mine, Justin, reached out to me, and he said, "Hey, you like spreadsheets, right?" And I said, "Absolutely, I do." And
everyone does.
Well, I don't know. I mean, there's got to be a handful of people in the world that
there are always outliers.
Yeah, that claim to like Excel and actually aren't lying to get a job or something. But yeah, I'm definitely one of those people. So when he said, "Okay, I have an operational role that would be, heavily Excel weighted, and we'd want to see what we can do with the data we're capturing," I jumped at it, and that was about 10 years ago. And I'm with a new company now for the past 6 years, but it's the same thing. It's a lot of fun, and both companies give me the ability to dig into the databases and see what information we can pull out of there to be more effective.
I like how
it's funny.
Go ahead, Ben.
I was going to say, it's funny that you mentioned that about the school and attendance and grades, because I noticed that every time I stopped going to Cal 2, I failed Cal 2. So, there might be a correlation there.
Well, it's because that class, people thought it was quite an easy class, because history of rock and roll. A lot of us know a lot about music, and it seems like the history of pop music when you're going into it. But it turns out it's a deep dive into a lot of different genres of music, and people had to be there to retain the information.
Oh.
Yeah, I like how you subtly took credit for students' grades. That's really nice. That's really I see what you did.
I changed 650 kids' lives every semester.
For people that may be more infrastructure minded, can you help us break down just a pretty basic question? What is data analytics at its core? Can you talk to that?
Sure. Well, data analytics is really it's more of a process. It's taking a large set of data. Well, it can be large or small actually, but it's taking a set of data and seeing what the story it tells you, and trying to manipulate the data in a way that it helps tell the story so you can make good decisions. And it all starts with data integrity, and that's the first piece. Is capturing data is kind of boring. Extremely boring. Having somebody sit at a terminal and enter data into fields all day is mind-numbing work, and it's very hard to do reliably. And so that step is actually one of the biggest hurdles you start with. Is if you don't have quality data going in, you're not going to have quality data coming out, and you're not going to be able to make good decisions. I think of data analytics and, like, if you think of a large book, right? War and Peace, for instance, that's
a very large book.
A very large book, yeah. It's got hundreds of thousands of words, and they're arranged in a specific order to tell the story. But if you take those words as individual data points and you don't do it right, you have the wrong words, or you have them in the wrong order, you're not going to have the same story, the same masterpiece that we know today. And so going from there, you get the data into the system, and then you have an analyst or a data scientist start asking questions like, what can we learn from what we've gathered? And also, if it's what do we want to learn? And then can we work back to what can we learn from that data? And so that data analytics is just that broad stroke of taking what you have and seeing if it can affect change and add to the knowledge base of what you want to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just kind of biting my tongue, making sure I didn't cut Ben off for a second time. I wanted to give him a chance to interject before I asked my follow-up question.
Yeah, man, go for it. I'm still struggling.
Well, we've talked, you said data analytics, and I've said data analytics a couple of times, but how does that correlate or play into business intelligence? What actually constitutes business intelligence?
Well, it kind of gets back to what I just said with data analytics, but now you apply it towards the principles of running a business, and there's a bunch of different ways that this plays out. So obvious ones are how can we look at the data that's out there about what we do, and the three of us are in solution-based selling, right? So it's not just selling a widget, and that's kind of easy to figure out where your market is and how to present that widget to whoever you want to. But when you're talking about solution selling, there's a lot of pieces, and there's it's a complicated sales cycle, and so you want to try to figure out what's the best way we can do things. Who should we be targeting? And so business intelligence is using data in a way to further your business like that. And the most interesting piece that I find is not so much trying to focus on who to sell to, but how are we selling? What are the stories our customers telling us? What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What best practices can we identify? Because imagine if you, like, for instance, a sales rep, right? You take a look at every sale that he's made over the course of the last 5 years, and you can see trends. Okay, breaking it down on a quarterly basis, his sales are heavily weighted to the first month of the quarter, which shows that he starts out strong and then it kind of peters out. And so you can kind of bring up ways as a decision maker or manager to help them figure out how to be more effective during the entire term. And it even be broken down even farther. You can find out that almost all of his orders are booked on a Friday, and that's just because they're rushing to get everything closed before the end of the week if they're on a weekly commit or something like that. And then you can help them figure out how to be more effective in that way too, like space out their business and be more effective across the board. In terms of customers, you can drill down and say, okay, I've got 100 customers in higher ed. Looking at the past 5 years sales data, it looks like June's a very important month, and we try to think why. Once you see that blip in sales, you realize, okay, maybe that's because school's out in June and they're preparing projects so that to be ready for next September. And so we should probably take that information and go back and look at April, May, and start talking to these people about what they want to do in June. And so business intelligence, it's about doing all of that, getting someone who's able to look at the data as well as people capturing the data, and making sure that the process is built, that the proper data is captured and it's stored in the proper way, and you have the right tools to look at everything and slice everything up to help the business grow.
When I think of data in general, and I think of analytics, and I think of businesses that leverage these sort of things, I naturally think about these big conglomerates with a lot of resources. We just recently did an episode centered around small businesses and how technology fits into their operations. And so what would you say to small business owners that might be looking to leverage technology and look at these metrics and analytics and really take their business to the next level, but have no idea, where to get started? How would you advise them on where to get started?
Well, there's a couple different things. One, you got to look at what data you're capturing in your normal day-to-day business cycle. So if you're a internet-based organization, you're going to have some sort of system that lets you know that an order has been placed and when and where and what and all of these other things. And from there, great, you've started. You've got a set of data to work on. Next, you need to figure out how could I get this data structured into a way that I can take a look and try to draw some insight into what I'm doing. And there's a bunch of free tools out there. If you're just getting started, there's Microsoft Power BI. That's a great tool. That's you can sign up, and I think it's a 30 or 90-day free trial. And it's extremely powerful because you can dump the data in kind of like what you'd see in a spreadsheet where it's just an array, and then use their tools, which are very easily manipulated to show just about anything. And the only problem with that is you have to really know what you're looking for. You have to say, okay, I want to increase sales on X, Y, and Z. And you look at who's bought those, and you try to relate back to other things that are selling well, right? Secondarily, there's courses out there because of the virus that you guys were talking about before COVID. There's a lot of universities out there putting free content online. Mm-hmm. And there's 3 or 4 different courses. I believe one of them's at Harvard, one of them's at MIT right now, where they go over data analytics, and you can take an entire semester's worth of courses and get a very quality semester's worth of education on that, and use that information and kind of what they're looking at it's an intro course, but from a modern college level to apply that to your small business. And it's the stuff that they go over there is extremely effective.
Man, that's an awesome suggestion, and I think you're right. I think that Harvard put out a substantial amount of their curriculum free online during this pandemic, and a bunch of other educational institutions have followed suit. Not saying that Harvard was the one leading the way, but they are a prominent institution that I'm aware has done that. So that's an awesome suggestion for people to take up.
Yeah, I know this. I think I saw it on Reddit recently. There's probably about 90 different universities that put out content like that. I know MIT started doing that maybe about 6 or 7 years ago, but because of the way things are and people have more time on their hands, I know I certainly do. I think we were talking before, I haven't left the house since March 12th.
Really? I was wanting to ask, how things have been for you and your family specifically, because, for people that don't know, you're up in the New York area. I mean, you're in a densely populated area that is seriously affected by the coronavirus right now. And so I wanted to ask how you're doing, man. You haven't left your house in how long?
Well, let's see. It's the 30th, so let's call it 6 weeks, a month and a half. And it's not so bad. I mean, I do have a backyard, even though we live in a Brooklyn brownstone, and I have a backyard, and so I can get fresh air, which is a luxury right now because a lot of my neighbors and people here in the New York area can't. But yeah, I haven't left the front door and walked on the street and seen the spring happening at all.
Wow. Back to your comments about telling the story of the data. That brings up some thoughts that I have that I really, really enjoy. So Warren Buffett is one of my role models. That guy was data driven from the time he was like 5. He was recording license plates when he was 5 on his one-way street, just so he could help the police in case there was ever a bank robbery, because he knew that was the only way banks were able to, or knew that was the only way in and out of that bank. So I guess one of the things that brings up to mind when you start talking about the story of data is really the metadata behind what you are looking at when it comes to the story and the privacy concerns that would show up there, if there are any. What do you think about diving too deep, or is there such thing as too deep when it comes to the story behind the data? Because there's one thing saying, yeah, every June we sell better to this particular customer, but on Thursdays this customer goes to the grocery store and has an interaction with somebody that they don't like, so we shouldn't email them on that day. Like, where is there a too far? Is there too much data? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. There is definitely too far. And I mean, we see it in the news fairly often. I mean, Cambridge Analytica, they're well known for taking this a little bit too far. And for those who don't know the story about how that kind of unfolded, I'll give the 10-second version. So Cambridge Analytica, through a third-party Facebook app, like I think it's My Digital Life or This Is My Digital Life, something like that, they purchased Facebook information for about, I think it was 375,000 users. And from that data that This Is My Digital Life had access to, they were able to grab people's adjacent friends' metadata and information and what they like and what they dislike. And so from that, they were able to build a model and extrapolate information about roughly, I think at one point they said they have 4,000 to 5,000 data points on 180 million US adults.
That's a lot.
And that's pretty much all of us.
That's a lot.
And so Now that information could be extremely useful in the right hands. I mean, it's like an axe, right? An axe, you can chop down a tree and use it to build a house, or you can, bop someone on the head and do a lot of damage. I mean, it's the tool. And I mean, the tool is the same. It's the person who uses it is really how it plays out. So Cambridge Analytica used that data to do a bunch of things. Like we know famously they helped Trump in the recent election. Good or bad, companies are do that. That's fine. But in other countries, they use that information to affect the outcomes of elections. And we don't know exactly kind of how it played out over here. That's not for me to say. This isn't a political discussion at all. But they showed that they were willing to use the information they were gathering to meet their own agenda. And so that's definitely a no-no. You don't want to do that. People are using this huge amount of data for good as well. There's a huge movement right now. It's actually called Data for Good. It's they're doing great things like trying to figure out how and why the homeless population exists, where it exists, what can we do to help them, what are specific problems to specific groups within these communities. And they're doing that through, providing some of them with cell phones so they can track location and they can push information out to them and say, hey, are you being affected by this right now, And so they can gather those data points with a bunch of people where traditionally we don't have any information about. Because it turns out it's not, these people just don't want houses. It's much more than that. They want to, there's mental health issues. There's, obviously financial issues, things like that. And so in order to fix the problem, we need to understand what we can address. And that gets back to the same sort of idea that we talked about before with business intelligence, right? Look at what we want to do and figure out how we can gather the data to do that.
Yeah, that brings up a good point with how Bill Gates was trying to help solve health issues in Africa. And he was using data and getting more progress using machine learning and correlating data based on location rather than the traditional going house to house or person to person saying, please go get vaccinated or please do these things. So yeah, I think there is definitely a good thing that data can do. But as we've seen with like the NSA and a lot of the things that are out there when it comes to metadata, like even phone calls and things like that you've made, there is a level of privacy that people expect that may be breached in some of these cases. So having a good terms of service, having a good way of collecting that data and being transparent with that data is very important.
I think, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think you're hitting the nail on the head with that. Being good stewards of the data is what we call it. And that goes to both having the right intention with the data you're collecting as well as protecting that data in two ways. One, I know you guys are both very familiar with cybersecurity, and that's a huge risk. I mean, who was it? Equifax? There was a huge breach, and I don't remember what the last count was, 150 million or so people's credit information were leaked, which opens up all of those people to identity fraud, and it's just a bunch of headache. Because a lot of times that gets resolved, but it takes a lot of time and effort to do so. Secondarily, like we just talked about, the data stewardship, making sure that when your data, when it gets leased out or used by someone else, or even people in your organization, it's going to be used for the right purposes. And there's hooks in contracts that penalize folks for doing the wrong things with it. Law firms, they're responsible for any of their subcontractors' use of the information that they have. They're legally responsible, and so they're very careful to not only vet out the people they're working with, but constantly monitor them. And I think that should be the same sort of thing with data and how people use data analytics.
Man, I'm glad that you brought up Equifax, because I wanted to commend you specifically for your role not in that, because you took your music degree and you did not apply for security at a major crediting agency, right? Yeah. Hopefully people know the background behind that. So we're starting to run a little short on time, and there's a couple of things that I wanted to kind of get out. I want to talk more on a general level real quick. We had a question in chat from Mr. Pruitt asking if we have any particular metrics that you think are best for companies to start with, basically to start small and then to build upon. Now, I know that's a pretty general question because all businesses are different, and all analytics that they would look at in order to empower their business models are going to be unique to those businesses. But do you have some just common elements that you see across the board for a lot of businesses on where small, medium, or large size businesses could start from to build a foundation and go from there?
Yeah, the best data to start with is the data you're already capturing. It's like I said, the data entry process is long and boring, and it often will disrupt your normal flow of business if you try to add a bunch to it right away. So let's look at like a bank, for instance. You know when an account's been opened, you know where their purchases are, you know how much money people have an account in their account, and so you can start looking at your customers and understanding them from that perspective, because you're just through the normal day-to-day interactions, you gather all that data anyway. So starting with what you have is the best start. Now, outside of that, if you're not tracking when the timestamps of when people are purchasing, when they're signing up, when they're doing things, that's something that might be extremely useful, because then you can start understanding and forecasting your business as well, and understanding your customer in terms of what their buying cycles are and things like that. And like you said, for retail, that might not be as important because you're relying on foot traffic, but for small businesses where you're trying to reach out to customers to do engagements, that very much is. Also website traffic, that's another very important one, because you're looking to see when certain products of yours are desirable. Secondarily, location, like Ben was saying, that's extremely important too, knowing where your customers are. You want to make sure that if you're going to be using this data to grow your business, you want to be reaching out to the right people. And where it could be a physical thing where our stuff is popular in the Northeast, or it could even just be an online thing where people who use this site, reddit.com, they tend to like this sort of stuff, so I'll make sure to advertise there.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, is that, the business model has moved from brick and mortar, where you just have foot traffic and you just have analytics for static places and environments for where your customers come into your establishment from. But now we have a plethora of ways that you can engage customers. And so based upon that, you obviously have a lot of different data and analytics at your disposal to make sure that you are efficient with your attempts to engage, based upon how you equip yourself with what knowledge, but also what avenues and what time you try to utilize that engagement process. So I think that's very important to bring up.
And absolutely, real quick, you touched on something with retail too that I think is, and this is really, really nerdy, and I apologize, but I love it so much. So they're using technology now, and this isn't really that new. It's been around for maybe 4 or 5 years, but using beacons and extremely smart Wi-Fi access points to interface with people's phones, because everyone's got one now, to figure out customers' behavior when they're in the store, and allowing customers to be identified, not necessarily by name and who they are, but in terms of this is customer number 0001, and seeing kind of what their patterns are and what would work for you. It used to be you just have a store manager kind of look at things and try something out and hope for the best. And now we can rely on hard data to tell us like what the best practice might be. This should be put here instead of here. And these are the sort of customers we get at these times. And it even gets to staffing. The fact that we can do that in the real world, almost in real time, is awesome.
Yeah, the intelligence behind that, behind ways to keep customers in the store longer, are very interesting. And casinos have been doing things like this for forever.
Yes, it's a great example. And it gets also to the point. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting.
No, you're good, man.
Stores and retail business that use that for good and just try to give their shoppers the best experience versus how can we get the most money out of our customers. I mean, that is the course. The goal of business is to make money, but to give the customers the best experience and use this information to do that, they will make the most money, in my opinion. Using the data for bad, like we're talking about Cambridge Analytica, just trying to extract the most amount of pennies from your customer. You can do that the same way, but I think you kind of see where I'm going with that. I mean, just basically, if you can set up those beacons, you can create a great experience for your customers.
Yeah, you've just talked about something that a lot of people might not have a lot of exposure to because it's relatively a new technology. When we talk about the Aruba beacons, or even now you have Juniper's Mist product out there with Bluetooth tracking and asset tracking properties. These things can be applied not only in the retail industry like you've just given, but for events and big venues to help people navigate complex spaces. I mean, there's a lot of different applications. Ben, do you know of any other smart APs out there? I know we try to stay vendorless when we're talking about tech and not really promote any specific companies, but outside of the two that I just mentioned, what other solutions are in that space to really empower companies to get this level of intelligence behind them?
Pretty sure Meraki has that, and I would guess over the next year or two that Bluetooth radio functionality is going to be widespread into even consumer type deployments, and the reason would be exactly that. So you can start tracking, so you can start saying, home automation things. When my phone is connected to my Wi-Fi, unlock my doors or make sure my garage is shut or something like that. Just being able to use that data, like Chris said, for good, I think, or for ease in the customer experience and your overall quality of life, I think is going to be where a lot of the digital data is going to be moving towards in the next few years.
Yeah, it's really cool from a residential perspective because, I mean, as you and I both know, we have smart homes. We utilize a lot of home automation and being able to incorporate basically cell phones as sensors whenever, person enters X room or enters the property, execute X, Y, and Z, or set scenes and lights and locks a certain way, temperature a certain way. Starting to think about how businesses can utilize that is very interesting, and just thinking of also of warehouse space and how they track assets so there's less shrinkage and things like that. It's very interesting to see how these technologies are permeating our entire culture from both a professional and residential perspective. Man, we have one more question in chat. Do you want to relay that one?
Sure. So when it comes to all of this data that we're getting, Bob asks, how can you talk a little bit about anonymizing it in the different types of data within business intelligence? And maybe just overall, just talk about anonymization of data. And this will probably be our last question because we're a little over right now.
Yeah.
In theory, I can. The companies I've worked with, we haven't had to because we're focusing on using it in the sales cycle. But I mean, it gets to, and this is actually something I'm doing online this week. I have a weekly spreadsheet Twitch session, just so people can watch me do spreadsheets every weekend. And this weekend, we're actually building a data set for to analyze and do some analytics on and build like a physical a proper database that we can call on and do. And so taking data, we want to have a huge data set, and I think generating that's kind of hard. So we want to take somebody's data and make it depending on how you want to do it, how secure you want it, you can hash it, you can do whatever, but make the fields so that they're identifiable and able to be acted upon, but not have any PII or anything like that in there. Like I said, I haven't had to deal with that much, so I won't be able to talk deeply about it. But I mean, just if it's for security perspective, hash it. If there's anything else, you can just do a straight substitution.
Yeah, I think that kind of plays into, from a cyber perspective, when I'm speaking with organizations that do a lot of development work and they've got prod and QA and dev boxes and environments. I think having scrubbing tools out there that scrub your data for that PII and scrub the production data and turn it into clean, healthy data that isn't able to be extrapolated into something that you can use against the business, or if you lose it, it becomes intellectual property lost or theft at that point. It's just dummy data, if you will.
So, Chris, for somebody that might, for a weird reason, be interested in seeing the crafting and process of one of these magnificent spreadsheets, where can they find you? What is your Twitch handle?
It's my gamer tag. It's twitch.tv/shmeh, SHMEHHH.
I'm sorry I asked already.
Yes.
Most people will, stream Call of Duty or Fortnite, but
on Twitch.
You're streaming spreadsheets.
I actually had to email Twitch and ask them to add Microsoft Excel as a program you could stream because they don't have a title for it. I guess no one's ever done it, and probably rightfully so. But it's just an attempt to help people gain a little literacy around Excel. The last project I had last week was just building a spreadsheet around making a metagame for Call of Duty. And it's just fun because people got involved that understand the game, but they don't understand spreadsheets. And so they got into it. And then we played it. It was fun. But also I want to do a quick shout out to, there's a Reddit subreddit called Data is Beautiful. And it's a bunch of people who do data analytics and they just present whatever they want to. And so they're people breaking down their own personal budgets. And you can kind of see what kind of person they are based on, okay, I end up spending about 10% of my income on travel. So that's that sort of person. And we talked about COVID. There's a ton of information where people are visualizing the data that we're generating about coronavirus and COVID-19. It's a great community, and take a look, and you'll be surprised at how interesting the things you'll find there are.
That's awesome, man. Well, with that, we'll let you get back to your day job. We really do appreciate you taking some time out of your day to sit down and talk tech with Ben and I. I know that I can speak on behalf of him and say that we both really enjoyed having you, man.
Definitely.
Thanks. This was fun.
All right, man. We'll talk to you later. Have a good one.
Sure.
All right, Ben, it's just me and you. Man, this was fun. I love that guy. Chris is great. He's smart, he's articulate, he's intelligent, but he's a good guy, and that's what I like most about him. It was a fun topic to discuss today. What did you think about today's episode?
Man, it's interesting to hear the story of, or to see the people that are working on building the story of data, because I've been guilty of just throwing data into spreadsheets and forgetting about it, or just populating databases, or what have you, when it comes to my day job of, I'm just going to type this into CRM and just leave, or I'm going to type this into this email and send it to 5 people who are supposedly working on the data that I'm putting in there and helping our company get better and better. So for me, seeing a story come from the data that people are putting into all of these systems, that's really interesting, and being able to help businesses grow using that data is also really interesting. So I could see, I always love having technology help customers and help people, but a subset of technology would be the data sitting on the technology, and that is really the core driver of helping the people. A phone might have 5G and let you do it faster, but what you're doing is manipulating data. So no, this is great, and I'm going to go check out that subreddit immediately to get off of this.
Yeah, he's one of the first guests that we've had that have actually, put a resource like that out there for people that want some more information, can go out and actually read up on and do some research. So that was really cool of him. Yeah. It was really interesting to me, just being someone that has grown up in the world of data, seeing not necessarily how business intelligence empowers companies to be successful, but how businesses are born out of the use of data. I mean, we have these big data companies that everybody talks about, the Amazons, the Googles, all of those, and to see how these companies came out of nowhere to be these huge juggernauts based upon a non-tangible asset that never existed really up until recently in human history is just a really interesting concept to me to have thought cycles on, so to speak.
Yep.
All right, I think we can kind of end it there. Who do we have up next?
Next Wednesday, we've got Darian. We're going to be talking about education, certifications, and just growing in your career, growing in your environment, and not staying stagnant with technology.
Growing in your career, growing in your environment, growing as a person is one thing I would just kind of tail on to the end of that. I'm really interested in talking to him also because education's a cornerstone in what I'm doing now in my professional life. But it's important to me just because in a lot of ways I think our educational system as a whole is flawed. And to talk to somebody who has a passion for learning, I'm interested to hear how he's most successful at learning. Because, for someone like me, if I sit down and try to study for a certification in the traditional traditional way. Man, it's a brutal experience because after just a half a page of reading, I'm ready to go to sleep. And so we have a lot of different ways that we consume information today. And so I'm interested to see what somebody who is as highly certified as Darian is, what method he actually utilizes to achieve the most success when it comes to retaining information that may not be exciting to you. I don't know, maybe he's only gotten certified in things that really get him jazzed up. But these are things that I can't wait to talk to him about.
Yep.
All right. So with that being said, this concludes episode 7. Tune in next time for episode 8 with Darian on Wednesday. And I guess I'll go ahead and go to the kickball kickoff and give people a call to action before we go ahead and get out of here. So Ben, I'll talk to you later, buddy. Have a good rest of your day, man.
Later.
All right, everybody, the kickball kickoff, the call to action. I haven't really prepared any words for today. All I want to leave you with is to just be honest and be true to yourself. Be constructive. So every interaction, every moment that we're involved in, especially in today's society, we seem to be entrenched in a rage-driven culture. And each interaction that we have gives each of us an opportunity to either be constructive or to continue to be part of the problem. And so with that in mind, anytime that you're in a situation where you can be critical of something, please do so in a constructive manner, because constructive criticism is almost always welcomed and allows people to grow. And rageful criticism usually doesn't get the responses or reaction or growth that you want to see somebody else achieve. So with that being said, just be honest and true to yourself, because sincerity is transparent. It comes across in all mediums. And just be, like I say, constructive. So with that, everybody have a good rest of your day. I guess school's out. Until next time. Bye, everybody.